The sun was setting over the sleepy coastal town of Oakwood Bay, painting the sky with hues of purple and gold. The small harbor was peaceful, its waters gently lapping against the docks where fishing boats were anchored. The sound of seagulls echoed through the air as the fishermen wrapped up their day's work, packing their gear into their boats and preparing for the next day's catch. Among them was a man named Jack Porter, a seasoned fisherman who had lived in Oakwood Bay for most of his life. He had a reputation for being the best in the area, a man who could read the waters like no other. But Jack wasn't just any fisherman. Before he had settled down with his wife, Laura, and their daughter, Emily, Jack had been a Navy SEAL. His past was a quiet one, and most people in town had no idea about his military service. He was just Jack, the fisherman who had an old boat and a quiet life. Emily, Jack's 19-year-old daughter, was a spirited young woman with a love for the ocean. She often joined her father on the boat, learning the ways of the sea, and helped him run the small seafood market they operated near the docks. Her blonde hair and easygoing nature made her a favorite of the locals, but she was never one to seek attention. Her world was small, and she liked it that way. However, one afternoon, Emily's peaceful life was about to be shattered. It began when a group of bikers rolled into town. They were a rowdy bunch, loud and reckless, their leather jackets adorned with patches and insignias that only hinted at trouble. They had been cruising along the coast, and Oakwood Bay seemed like a good place to stop for a while. As they pulled up to the seafood market, their leader, a tall man named Razor, decided they would take a look around and see if there was anything worth causing a bit of chaos over. Razor was known for his temper and his disregard for anyone who didn't fall in line with his rules. The bikers dismounted and walked into the market. Emily was behind the counter, cleaning a few fish, her back turned to the door. She didn't hear the bikes roar to a stop or the thud of heavy boots on the wooden floor. When she turned around, she was greeted by the sight of Razor and his crew, their eyes scanning the shop like predators eyeing their prey. "What's this? Fresh catch of the day?" Razor's voice was deep and mocking. Emily tensed, but she didn't show it. "We have the freshest seafood in Oakwood Bay. If you're interested, I can help you with your order." Razor stepped closer, his eyes lingering on her, a grin spreading across his face. "Fresh seafood, huh? You sure you're old enough to be handling knives, sweetheart?" Emily kept her composure. "I've been handling knives since I was a kid. I'm fine." The biker gang laughed, and one of the others, a burly man with tattoos covering his arms, grabbed a fish from the counter and threw it at her. "Well, maybe we should make this more interesting," he sneered. Emily caught the fish. Instinctively, her years of practice with her father's trade kicking in. She placed the fish back on the counter, her expression firm. "This isn't a game. Please, leave." The laughter stopped, and Razor's eyes darkened. "You're feisty, huh? Maybe we'll have some fun with you before we leave. You look like you could use a little attention." Emily's stomach churned, but she refused to show fear. "I'm asking you to leave. Now." Razor stepped closer, his breath hot on her face. "Or what? You'll call your daddy?" The words hung in the air, and Emily froze for a moment. The bikers knew she was alone in the shop, and the taunts and threats were escalating. But what they didn't know was that her father, Jack Porter, wasn't just any fisherman. Back at the docks, Jack was finishing up his work, his hands calloused from years of labor. He'd been keeping an eye on the bikers from a distance, sensing that something wasn't quite right. His SEAL training had never left him, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up as he noticed Razor and his crew harassing Emily from the window of the shop. Without a second thought, Jack grabbed his jacket and headed toward the market. Inside, Razor was pushing Emily against the counter, and the situation was growing more tense by the second. Emily, however, wasn't backing down. She had her father's stubbornness and resilience in her, and she wasn't about to let some biker bully her. The door to the market slammed open, and in walked Jack Porter, his expression cold and determined. His eyes locked onto the bikers, and in an instant, the mood in the room shifted. There was something about Jack's presence, an air of authority, a sense of danger, that made the bikers hesitate. Razor's grin faltered as he sized up the older man. "You're the fisherman's daughter, huh?" Razor sneered, his voice laced with menace. Emily straightened up, her eyes brightening with a sense of relief. "Dad, don't." But Jack cut her off with a steady, calm voice. "I think it's time you leave. Now." Razor scoffed, eyeing Jack up and down. "And who the hell are you to tell me what to do?" Jack didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward with a predator's grace, his body language radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had been trained to deal with far worse than a group of drunken bikers. "I think you're mistaken," Jack said, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable authority. "You don't want to find out who I am." Razor laughed, the sound mocking, but there was an edge of uncertainty to it now. "Oh, really? And what's that supposed to mean, old man?" Jack's eyes never wavered. "You don't want to mess with me. Trust me." One of the bikers made a move toward Jack, and before anyone could react, Jack's hand was on his wrist, twisting it in a precise, painful lock that had the man gasping for air. The biker fell to the ground with a thud, and the others froze. Emily's heart raced as she watched her father effortlessly handle the situation. She had never seen him in action like this, never seen the man who had been her quiet, protective father, now transformed into something far more dangerous. Razor's face turned pale, his bravado quickly fading. He wasn't used to backing down, but he wasn't stupid enough to pick a fight with someone who moved like Jack. He raised his hands in surrender. "Fine, we're leaving. You've made your point." With one last glare, Razor and his crew stormed out of the shop, muttering curses under their breath. Jack turned to Emily, his expression softening as he took in her shaken form. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "Yeah, but I had no idea you could do that." Jack gave a small, rueful smile. "There's a lot you don't know about me, kid. Maybe it's time I told you a few stories." The two stood in the shop for a moment, the silence between them filled with unspoken understanding. The town of Oakwood Bay might have seen Jack Porter as just a fisherman, but Emily knew now that her father was so much more. And no one, not even a gang of bikers, would ever mess with her again. From that day on, Emily never looked at her father the same way again. And the town, too, would never forget the quiet, unassuming fisherman with a past that could make anyone think twice before crossing him.